Hi, my name is Malawi, and I am a poet and a performer and a community organizer, and try to be an activist for social justice issues. I started when I was really young. The first poem I really remember writing, I was maybe 14 or 15, and it was a poem about what I imagined my first kiss would be like, because I hadn't had my first kiss yet. And I wrote it in my room at night, and then I folded the paper into many small pieces and hid it in my pillowcase so my parents would never find it. I think for me it's always been about the ability to express what I'm feeling, especially performance poetry, or what people call spoken word, because it's a way to be listened to and heard and to express yourself clearly. People always tell me that I'm like really loud, and I have a bad habit of interrupting people. But I think that's because you had to be like that to get a word in edgewise in my family. And everybody always talked over each other, and I'm the youngest, and I'm a girl, and my brother's a little bit in love with himself, and he's a little bit older, so he got listened to a little bit more, I think. I remember there's this really old recording of me and my brother. My mother recorded this. We were little kids, and I'm telling my mother, "He's tricking me! He's tricking me!" Because I guess like he was doing something against me, and she didn't understand what I was saying. And until like she played that recording for me years ago and told me like, yeah, until today I really don't know what you meant. But you could tell that I'm just so desperate for her to understand what I'm trying to say. So I think poetry really appeals to me on that level, and that's why in my work I really don't use a lot of metaphor or flowery language. It's not one of those poems where it could be about so many different things. Like, I'm very plain spoken, and you know what I'm saying and you know what the point is, because I'm trying to communicate an idea very clearly. My poetry mainly comes out of my own direct experiences. So a lot of it is about the interplay of different identities or different political ideas, and how they sort of intersect within a person. So like at the micro level of human experience, I usually write about experiences that I've had with people. Usually men, unfortunately. A lot of it is that, like my dad or some guy who was terrible to me. But I try to like place myself within that scenario as a woman, and a woman of color, and how that influences what I'm experiencing, or as an immigrant. And so yeah, it's political but also very personal. I'm really passionate about migrant justice, and so I've done some work with different groups like Solidarity Across Borders, or like No One Is Illegal. Again, just that idea of how this really big issue, which is people all over the world who want to be somewhere other than they are for a variety of reasons, and because of borders and this very fake idea of lines that dead people drew on a map can't move around, and so that's a really big idea. And but I'm interested in how it affects everyday people at the level of like day-to-day experiences, and how that affects people's lives, and whether kids are able to go to school, or whether people are able to find the work they want, or whether people feel like they can speak out because maybe if they're not a citizen or they're not a permanent resident, they can't really speak out or show their views so openly because they're afraid. So all of that really interests me. So both of my parents are Tunisian, and I was born in Tunisia. and we moved to the States when I was very young. I grew up in the States. I actually grew up with, we can say, I guess like precarious status would be the best way to put it. And when I was 18, I came to Canada, and I've actually been in Canada a little over 11 years now. And it was only 6 months ago that I myself became a permanent resident. So I actually lived here for 10.5 years, over a decade, before I was deemed permanently residing here. So definitely, I would say that, I don't know, I've probably been actively doing this for a short while, working with Solidarity Across Borders, and like I was saying, being so open, so openly challenging a system. But it's definitely something that I've lived and thought about for a long time. Well, what I love about poetry is that, especially performance poetry, so it's mixing the art of words and the art of speaking, and both of those things are really exciting to me, and I love poetry for its ability to communicate an idea clearly and also very passionately. So I remember, if you can think about like even the speeches of Abraham Lincoln that we all still know and still read, in the Gettysburg Address, which I think is only like 400 words, is still very famous, and words really impact people. And so for me, poetry is a vehicle, not only to get an idea across, but hopefully to do something bigger, to bring people together, to move change forward. To get people excited, to unite people. So yeah, so actually a lot of my pieces touch directly on that experience, on being a woman of color, on being a migrant, and I'm willing to share some with you if you like. It talks about migration generally and why people immigrate and people's experiences once they're here, but a lot of the poem is directly taken either from my own experience or the experience of people that I know. We came here because home is hostile. You sent billions to men who did not represent us, who only sought to oppress us. And with your money, they bought mansions and machine guns, armies with artillery as far as the eye can see. You blamed us for the corrupt governments you yourselves installed and supported, winking at false elections and ignoring our protests as paranoid speculation. We left because we were afraid to speak in our homes. We left because they stole our businesses from us. We left because our children deserve better than scant education and no hope of work for the few who make it. We did not want to leave, but we had no choice. Not after you came in ships dressed for war, not after drones and slave stealers and divide and conquer tactics and a neo-liberalism that empowered our oppressors to shut down the schools and defund the hospitals. Not after your relentless, all-white media campaigns coming and convincing us that even our own skin was shameful, that speaking our language was the mark of miseducation, that our men were brutal and our mothers ugly. And so we came, convinced of better across the ocean. You came to us, and so we thought it opportune to come to you. We came because they said it would be better, but now better has turned bitter as we discover that you don't want us. You ask about our educational background and financial capacity, about the languages we speak and the politics we hold, all the questions we weren't able to ask you when you came to us. And why these questions we wonder, but of course we already know. Now as then, resource extraction is your game. See, you mined the land, ripped out the rivers, decapitated the mountains until nothing was left, nothing but us. Yes, us. There's still blood flowing in these veins. After all, there's still sweat slick on face. There's still gold of some sort to be mined. Work. You scream, work until there is nothing left in you but to sit silently and watch on the television screen the lives of those who have leisure time. And for those of us who cannot work, cannot fill your factories and farms and feeding houses, you've got no use for us. No patience, no papers, no patience, no papers, no patience, no papers. See, we came because we thought it would be better, but now better has turned bitter. But listen to me. You should have cut out my throat, torn apart my vocal cords, because as long as there is breath in this chest, I will fight. We will fight, and we will scream, and we will unite, and we will dream, and we will win. This poem is dedicated to resistance, to the airport you did not build in Mexico, and the lines you did not install in India, for the pipeline that will not be built in Turtle Island, and the lives you have not destroyed despite your very best efforts. So come into the hospitals and steal the sick, come into the schools and intimidate the children, come with your riot gear and your best attempts at assimilation. We are ready to meet you. We are not afraid. We will not compromise. We are willing to resist until all of us die, and know that even then we have poured this just cause into the hearts of our children, so that when it is their turn, the next generation will be prepared to fight. So come. Come. Absolutely, it's a form of cultural expression. I reject the term subculture because language, like I said, language, especially from a poet's perspective, language is really important, and language really shapes the way we think about things. So when we talk about something being marginal or something being a subculture, it's a way to say that it's small, or specifically that it's smaller, and smaller than what? Than the mainstream, than the dominant culture. But that's not a mistake, right? Like, I'm a migrant justice activist, so I know that numbers are on purpose. It's not an accident that we just happen to live here in a country where the majority of the population comes from a European descent. That's not an accident, that's the result of imperialism. So hundreds of years ago, people came here and there was a genocide against the indigenous non-European people that lived here. And until today, we have very strict number controls on the people that can come here. So for example, when I want to go to the States, I'm a French citizen. So because I come from France, I can get what's called a visa waiver. And that means I can cross the border very, very easily. But if I wanted to use my Tunisian passport, I'd have to apply for a visa, I'd have to wait, it would be a limited amount of time, I may have to pay a lot of money. So that's not a mistake, right? And a big part of that is this idea of like the dominant. So European backgrounds or white people are the dominant here on purpose because of policies we've created. And so, you know, there's, in terms of like where I come from, there's, when you speak about brown people or you speak about people from, I'm from North Africa, so if you're talking about people from the continent of Africa or people from the Middle East or from Southeast Asia or Western Asia, there's so many more of us than there are Europeans or white people, but somehow we're made to believe that, you know, our culture is a subculture or is smaller than or less than. So I definitely don't think of it as a culture, but I would say absolutely, like, we're creating culture, and that's the most beautiful thing about it. With every person adds their own creativity, every person adds their own layer, every person adds their own voice, and bit by bit, generation by generation, we build what the culture is. So when you think about it that way, it's really a huge responsibility and not just a privilege to be able to express yourself and to express your voice and to contribute. In social justice and in activism, you're critiquing culture that already exists, that is unfair in some way, or that's hurting people in some way. And a big part of that, and a big part of poetry, is also imagination. And so you're not only critiquing culture, but you're providing a vision of what a different way to do it might be like. What might a more equitable world be like? What might a more open world be like? And so you create that through imagination, and that's part critique and part poetry. I don't, I think it's all different facets of the same thing. And that, there's a lot of tools in the toolbox, and we need every one of them to build the kind of culture that we want to live in, the kind of world that we want to live in. So we need people who are in the streets, we need people who are writing, we need lawyers, we need professors, we need scientists. I guess that's what really appeals to me about the idea of an open world that I'm trying. I don't want a world with borders. I don't want a world with divisions. I want something where we can all come together, no matter sort of what paradigm we're seeing it through. Well, I'm a word person, and so I always take words almost literally, and I want to understand the definitions of words, and I want to understand how words come together. So when I think about pluralism, it's basically the word plural with ism on it. So I throw away ism because you can add ism to any word and create a new concept. But plural means more than one, right? Yeah. When you make something plural, you add an S to it. That means multiple. So I guess if I was going to define pluralism, I would just say that it's accounting for the fact that there's more than one. There's more than one type of person, there's more than one viewpoint, and so all of those things need to be given space and need to be accounted for. Absolutely. I mean, there's not only there's a range of issues, and there's also a range of styles. So I've been deeply influenced by people who do work around critical race theory and theories of racism, people who do work around feminist issues and women's issues, people who combine those things and talk about issues that specifically affect women of color, which is how I identify. There's indigenous activists, there's environmental activists, so there's definitely many different types, and also, within poetry there's many different, not obviously subjects that you can speak about, as I just said, but also styles. So, there's everything from Allen Ginsberg to Snoop Dogg, and I think that they're both poets. And I've definitely been personally been so enriched and so blessed by the legacies of African American poetry, of Langston Hughes, and all the poets around the Harlem Renaissance that were creating culture. And you see that continuing into today, where some of the most beautiful and powerful work is coming from poor children in bad neighborhoods, who are creating this amazing culture. There's also Suhair Hamid, who is this amazing Palestinian poet from the Bronx who writes really beautifully. So yeah, there's a lot, and it's amazing. I think everything I do flows out of my identity. And when I'm not doing things, so I'm not always active in, social justice scenes, or there's been really long periods where I haven't written. And those periods, I would say, come out of not being in touch, or not being able to really be in touch with my identity or with who I am. To me, the work is partly survival, but there's also a certain level of functioning and already surviving that you kind of have to be at least for me, to be able to do the work. So everything, I would say, flows out of who I am, and some things at the time are just too painful or too hard to deal with, and I'm too tired. But then when I'm able to take a step back, get a breather, process some of the things that I've gone through, the work flows out of it. We go on and do what brown girls have always been taught. Smile nice, but not too wide. Listen more than you speak. Give more than you take. Serve more than you have. Because this brown baby is the only possible path to love's best imitation, companionship. keep the company happy, and they'll keep coming back. See, it's not about the love you lack, it's about the service you can render. So stop fighting and surrender. Ease into the role. Think about it like a black hole. An infinite space in which you disappear and no one will hear any sound you make. So don't make sounds. Stop asking us to listen. Shh, shh, shh. Because this is the truth, brown girl. You are alone. And I say that because I've lived that. There is no amount of forced, faux, lighthearted laughter that will convince them that you are easy to love. Your heavy heart will not hide forever. There is no forgetting, there is no winning, so don't try to win. Accept the defeat. Burn to the ground the dream of a life you were long ago convinced you wanted, and dance among the flames. Let the ashes coat your skin like fine silk and wash them away with your ocean tides of tears. And when you have finished, sleep. Let the pool of salt you've created cradle and envelop you. Taste it and thank it, because you are still here, because tears do not threaten breath the way blood does. And then, when you are ready again, wake. Open your eyes and see yourself surrounded by fellow survivors. We who've endured stand with you. We are not perfect, we are wounded and sometimes afraid, but we know instinctively how to love. Tell us who you are and we will believe. Speak and we will listen. Show and we will see. Fall and we will support. Ask and we will give. And until that day, and until the day when that dream is fulfilled, the only advice anyone can give you, brown girl, is to keep breathing. No one wants us to live but each other. We were never meant to survive, but here we are, breathing. Do not stop breathing. Breathe, even when you do not believe. Breathe and live.